Many of us, the topic here is Social Security. Many of us, especially in the young professional range, have seen our Social Security statements, which set forth how the trust fund will be paying out more than it's taking in. And current projections are that the fund will be exhausted by 2042, which is right around the time of our targeted retirement. Our Social Security system is on an unsustainable path. With the uncertainty that provides our generation in their planning for retirement income, what changes would you propose to help ensure that the contributions our generation makes to this trust fund are there for when we need it, like it has been for other generations? Mr. Murphy.
Thanks. So, Matt, this is an important issue. I know I talk to a lot of young professionals who say Social Security is not to be around when I get there and when I need it. It needs to be. It is a bedrock of our communities. 75 years ago, FDR championed Social Security. I have the honor to have Hyde Park, where FDR's home and presidential library are, in the district that I represent, the district that we all live in. And I've been down there many times for events celebrating FDR's life. This was a signature achievement for FDR and for those of us in this country because it makes a difference in the lives of every American. I'm lucky enough to have 3 grandparents alive, all of whom receive Social Security right now. For my grandmother, it's the main way that she survives and pays her bills. It's that for so many seniors in our communities. So it's absolutely something we need to keep. And I believe strongly it's something we need to keep in a similar form to what we have today. It should not be privatized. It should not be put over into market investment accounts for people to run like a 401k. This is the right structure to have a guaranteed payment to people so that they can afford rent and food and prescription drugs and the things that they need. So what are we going to do over time to fix it? I'm open to looking at small tweaks on all fronts. The amount of money that, the limit for who pays into it could be tweaked. The age at which you retire could be changed. Not something that would affect people that are currently retiring, but 25 years from now, might you have to work a few months longer before you get your Social Security? Those changes could be looked at. And I think the right way to do that is this deficit reduction commission that we put in place. This is an important step forward because we get out of the partisan bickering that is so broken. Everybody knows this. In Albany and Washington, it's so broken. Right now, there's 18 people, half Democrats and half Republicans, in this deficit reduction commission that the president set up, meeting behind closed doors, working to come together on solutions. They have come to me a couple times to seek out my guidance on things because I've got a reputation as a fiscal hawk and somebody who's working on finding solutions to our budget problems. And I'm very excited to say Senator Simpson and Erskine Bowles, who are running this, I think they're making some progress, and I'm hopeful that they're going to come up with some bipartisan solutions to maintain Social Security and extend it out into the future.
Well, first of all, with regard to the second stimulus, listen, it was a given because the school districts have already went through their budget process, and it was painful. Even in our own school district, Ichabod Crane, they worked through some hard issues and made tough decisions. And they're already set for this year. They're moving forward. And then the federal government comes in and says, well, we're going to give you this money for this 1 year. You know, the school district's already working on next year. And so when you come forward, what are we going to do? Keep the teachers to 125 for 6 months? These are hard choices. Superintendents right now are struggling because having already made those tough choices, they want to move on and address other priorities. But the problem is the stimulus comes with strings, with unfunded mandates that tells them how to spend it. And it wasn't paid for. So, you know, when you look at the fact that $14 billion of this was a rescission of what they're calling future spending in 2014 to food stamps. Okay? I mean, that is not paying for anything. If I go into a store and I say, you know, bike costs $100, here's $50, and I'm going to come to your store next week and spend $50, and I'm not going to do it, that's my other $50. You'd never go for that. You'd say, that's crazy. I want the other $50, and you should. Fiscal conservatives would do that. This bill was not paid for. It violated PAYGO. This is something that my opponent said he was for, full-throated PAYGO, and this violates that. So once again, not fiscally responsible legislation. With regard to Social Security, there's a lot of agreement, actually, on what Scott just said. You know, I believe the #1 priority is the economy. We need to focus on that, get the private sector economy going so we stop dipping into the Social Security fund. Then we need to work to balance the budget. The Social Security situation, I believe, can wait until we get the economy going and balance the budget. It's a great program. For all the reasons that Scott mentioned, I think we need to preserve it. And what I thought was unfair is that you said that I was for privatizing it in your remarks. I'm not for privatizing that. I'm for keeping our sacred trust with the senior citizens. And you know, some of the suggestions that you brought forward, here's my point on the long-term efficacy of the program. We need to work this out together. It's got to be Democrats and Republicans. You know, Senator Byrd, when we looked at the health care bill, he said reconciliation was never meant to jam a major piece of legislation through. And it's the same with Social Security. We're going to have to go forward. For what it's worth, I think the suggestions he put forward are reasonable and should be part of the negotiations. You know, as far as this debt commission, though, let me make one final comment. I'm concerned about it because clearly I want to balance the budget, but when I don't hear talks about significant reductions coming forward, I start to reach to protect my wallet. This is not the time to raise taxes. Not in the middle of recession. It's not a good idea. You know what happened in 1929? They raised taxes twice and they went from 6.5% unemployment to 13% unemployment and then to 25% unemployment. That's the real truth of what happened. All that, by the way, was a year after the crash of the stock market. Thank you.
On taxes, on January 1st of next year, as many people know, federal estate tax is scheduled to return with a 55% tax imposed on estates valued at $1 million or more. This death tax affects many of the ordinary folks and their families around the country. Although certainly $1 million estate sounds like a lot to most of us, the reality is, you know, at the end of our lives, our parents and our grandparents, when you take into account properties and assets that they've acquired during their lifetimes, you can creep up to the $1 million level pretty quickly. What is your stance on the issue, and what federal estate tax level would you feel is equitable and fair to responsible citizens who manage to accumulate wealth that they would like to transfer to their children and families and possibly charities, and not the federal government? I'm going to start with Mr. Gibson.
Okay, thanks. You know, with regard to taxes and what's clearly coming as a major issue, and will be so in the next 60 days or so, the people's tax cuts of 2001 and 2003, including the estate tax. And let's be clear on this. I mean, these are taxes that impact all of us, and there are tax cuts. And if we abate them now, and if we sunset them, that's a tantamount to a tax increase in the middle of a recession. And I oppose that. I think we need to sustain these tax cuts. Some would say that's for the rich. It's not so. You know, you're looking at, if these tax cuts abate, the 10% tax bracket is going to go away. It's going to go to 15%. The marriage penalty is going to be reinstituted. You know, the child tax credit, which is $1,000 now, will be halved to $500. The capital gains is going to move from 15% to 20%. We're going to impact dividends too. And the estate tax. The estate tax come 1 January is going to go to $1 million. This will crush our family businesses here. And I met some more of them this afternoon in Washington County, farmers. And you think about it, it's just patently unfair. And folks who've worked all their lives, paid taxes on what they did, and then they want to pass it to their children. I mean, that's something that we should support. So we clearly got to move the estate tax. I think it's another one of the areas where we have to work in bipartisan agreement. I think it's reasonable to move it to $8 million, but I'm not hard on that figure. I think that we certainly, $1 million is not where we need to be. Thank you.
So the tax issue is a very important one. I agree to some degree with Chris on this. I think the estate tax, what we've seen happen to it, this yo-yo over the last year, is absolutely ridiculous. It's indicative of poor behavior and poor work by the people in Washington. Didn't get this done, and it's outrageous. I voted for an estate tax fix. Right now, this year, the estate tax is gone, just for this 1 year. For those who haven't followed this, George Steinbrenner dies, has $1 billion estate, didn't pay a penny. All went on. Next year, if he dies, he'll pay 55%. His heirs will pay 55% of everything over $1 million. So something like $500 million in taxes. That's the difference. The policy is totally broken. We should have an exemption for our small businesses, the kind of businesses people build in this area, the kind of businesses that I've built. I think the right level is probably $3.5 million or $5 million for each person. It means if a couple has a business, they get twice that much that they can pass on to the heirs tax-free. And beyond that, there should be a tax. Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, a lot of the people that made a lot of money in this world agree. It's fine to have a tax. We want to encourage people. I want to encourage people to build new businesses and build new wealth. I'm not as worried about building aristocracies and passing it down to future generations. What I want to do is encourage people to build new stuff. I don't want anybody to lose their business because the breadwinner dies and they don't realize that they're going to get hit by an estate tax at a $1 million. That's an unacceptably low level. That puts our farms at risk and our small businesses at risk. Now the other piece of this, Chris touched on the Bush tax cuts that expired at the end of this year, and some of the good ones that I think we want to maintain. I am in favor of expanding and extending the tax cuts for all of our middle-class families. I want any of the tax cuts for people making less than $250,000 for a couple to be extended, because I think that's what we need to do in a recession in this tough time, and make sure that our families that are getting squeezed by property taxes don't get squeezed by tax increases. But the wealthiest Americans, those people making over $250,000 a year, think it's unacceptable for us in this fiscal circumstance to pass another tax cut for them. That would be $700 billion over the next 10 years, a fiscal blockbuster, and that money goes almost exclusively to the richest Americans. If you put 1,000 of these people in a room, half the money would go to one guy in the corner, the richest guy in the room. We don't need to do that. Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, those guys can afford to pay a few percent more. We need to protect our middle-class families and at the same time be fiscally responsible, not those $700 billion of the wealthiest Americans.
Thank you both. A couple moments ago, you both touched upon the recent federal aid package. And that's the latest $26 billion federal aid package signed by President Obama earlier this month. And in it was $10 billion for school districts to retain or rehire teachers, counselors, classroom aides, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, and other employees. But recent news reports are tending to indicate that the school districts may actually be targeting these funds to this year's staff and not really to rehire, as was the initial hope of the bill. In addition, long-term prospects for sustaining these jobs after the end of this funding, the annual funding, is somewhat unclear. What can we do to spur the rehiring of teachers and other necessary positions? And what about the long-term funding of those positions? Mr. Murphy?
So I did support this package, and this was a difficult debate that we had in Washington. This was money to help our local school districts. How do you pay for it? They first came to me and said, we just want to do this as an emergency to help our schools. And I said, I think that we need to be fiscally responsible. We need to pay for these bills. And so we negotiated and went back and forth. And at the end of the day, we came up with a package that was fully paid for, dollar for dollar. There's some disagreement about that, but that's how it works. If you look at the math over the next 10 years, it's paid for. If you look out further than that, it's paid more, because what we did was we came up with a solution. And it's actually a solution that has its own benefit, which is we closed these foreign tax loopholes on companies shipping jobs overseas and said, you can't get a tax break for that. You've got to pay your taxes, and make it a level playing field so companies will invest here. That does two things. It, one, gives us the money to help our local school districts, and it, two, encourages businesses to be here, which improves our tax base and therefore helps with the long-term problem of how do you fund this going forward. Now, our school districts have tough choices to make. In the district that I serve, there are a lot of school districts that are shrinking, and they've got to look at ways to consolidate services, to be more efficient and effective. That is something that absolutely has to happen. It's been happening, it's got to happen more, and everybody has to work together to do this. We need the teachers and the secretaries and the administrators and the school boards to work together. It's something, my wife serves on the school board here in Glens Falls. My kids go to school at Sanford Street School. It's very near and dear to our heart. It's something we talk about all the time. But I think the right thing to do is to help in the short term and to set up real work that has to be done in the long term to get to a budget balance. But the key to having the money to fund our schools is having a healthy economy. And that starts with investing in local jobs and focus on building those businesses here. That's what I've been doing as a small business person. That's what I've been doing in Congress, and that's what I'm going to continue to do.